Just to introduce myself, I'm Mike Shembri, and I'm here with the UCSF SAS users group, and we're here today to take a look at Enterprise Guide. And for this presentation, I'm going to start off with a really basic introduction of Enterprise Guide and just kind of show how you run programs in it, so you get a feel for it and enough to get your feet wet and get started into it. I'm not going to give a thorough, description of all the features, but I'll start with that, and then I wanted to show an example of how I use Enterprise Guide at the Women's Health Clinical Research Center in our clinical trial data management, just to get a feel of what some of the features can be really beneficial for large data management projects, and so I kind of wanted to illustrate that and give you a sense of some ideas that you might use it for in your projects. Feel free to ask questions any time along the way. But let's go ahead and get started with the demo. So this first example, just to show you, the Enterprise Guide files are these EGP extension. They're project files. And so I created a really basic example here. This example has 2 programs in it. And then, like I said, this file is actually a project file. It can contain programs. It can contain other objects as well. And you'll see examples of that. Just kind of a layout here. This part here is the workspace. So this is where you have and these little icons are called nodes. They can be programs or tasks or links to data. On the left is some navigation, and on the lower left is a utility window that I'll describe a little bit more later. But just to get your feet wet and see how it works, I'm going to open this program here. These are 2 programs. One's just a basic, the first one that we're looking at now is just a basic kind of data management, pulling in some data from Excel, doing a proc transpose to get 1 record per participant. So there's 3, the data contain 3 observations of insulin values, 0, times 0, 30, and 120 minutes. And so I'm doing a proc transpose to get 1 observation per participant, and then merging it with some demographic data. It's just an example program to see how Enterprise Guide runs. So I'm going to run that by just going up here to the Run menu. It wants me to confirm that I'm going to replace previous output, so I'm going to say yes. And the log shows the notes. And Enterprise Guide works a little bit different here. We're looking at the program window, and the program window contains everything for that program. It's the program, the log, and then when you have output from the program, it includes a tab with the output data sets, and you have a drop-down menu. You can select any of the data sets that were output from that program. So if I close this and go back to my workspace, my first program has run. It's created. These are shortcuts to the actual data sets.
And so it's just, in the previous screen, it was just permanent data sets that are output, correct? It doesn't have temporary data sets?
It doesn't distinguish. It treats them, as far as what we're looking at here, it doesn't matter whether they're permanent or temporary. These are shortcuts to it, so if I come here, it tells me there the file name is work.insulin. So this is a temporary data set. Okay. So it'll create little icons, and it'll create these directional arrows for the creation. And in this example, the second program is just a simple proc univariate. It could be some analysis program. But I want to take this data set, which is the merged data, and tell Enterprise Guide that that's the input to this program. And I'm doing that to tell Enterprise Guide I need to create this data set before running this program. So now Enterprise Guide has a concept of kind of how the order in which these programs need to run, and what some of the links are. This is called a link. These are called nodes. These links are created by Enterprise Guide, and then the dashed ones are the ones that you create manually. So I'm going to go ahead and run this entire process flow. It starts with the first program, puts a task list down here in this lower window, and then runs the second program and creates icons for the HTML output. And in this program there's a ODS RTF, so it creates a link to the RTF file. So here's my output. And so now I'm looking at the program window for the second program, where I have the program code, the source code. Here's my proc univariate. There's my ODS RTF statement. I have the log that ran. I have the HTML output, and then a link to the Word file, which if I clicked on download, it would open up that file in Word. That's really the basics of how you run a program in Enterprise Guide. It's really good for having multiple programs and linking them and creating relationships between the programs and the data files. But with that is kind of get you started with using it. Let me show you the error handling is really nice. It has some really good features for error handling. If I run, if I take out a semicolon and run this, there's a log summary down here. So if I click, while I'm looking at my log at the top, if I click on any of the errors, then it will go directly to that error in the log. And so you can locate it right away, which is really nice for a long program. You can toggle on and off. It'll display errors, warnings, and notes, and you can toggle each of those on and off depending on what you want to display down here. And then the other thing it does with the errors, back on your display here, it adds a little check mark to that to let you know that that ran with an error. If it ran with a warning, it would have a little yellow triangle with an exclamation in it. So it's very easy to identify a program in your series didn't run, and to and then identify within the program what the error is and how to fix it. So I'll run this again, get it working, and there you go. That's the basics of running regular programs in SAS. I think these features here, they turn out to be really nice. In the next example, I'll show you how those have been really useful. But I think this is enough to get you started running your programs and working the way you do now in SAS, but trying it in Enterprise Guide. The editor has some features that are nice as well. It does autocomplete, so if I have a var statement here and I want to add a new variable to that, I hit space, and it will give me a list of the variables that are available. So I can click there. If I want to add an option to the proc statement, I can do the same thing. It'll give me a list of the and then if I want to look at the syntax for proc univariate, you hover over the proc univariate and it'll give you the syntax. So
does it? I like to hang on to log and list files from batch runs of my programs. Can you set it up so that it automatically produces those for you?
So that's a good question. Right now, everything is contained within this project, and so it keeps it in here. When you rerun it, it replaces it, and you have to go into the project to actually look at the log and list. You can. There's two things you can do. You can for the source code, you can indicate that you want to link it to an external file. So rather than having embedded source code, you can have it linked to an external program. So you can save your programs that way. For the logs, you can have them exported. So
you actually would have to go in and, if I have a big project that's running 15 programs, I would have to go into each and say, save this log file, save this.
No. So if we're looking at the log here, there's an export, and you can either export it manually for each time you run it by going to export log, or you can set up another process, another task that will do that for you. So you can add, once it's run, you'll have a link off of that program that'll create a text file for the log, and it'll export it to the location that you want to. And that's
so you just make it part of the project then?
Exactly. Okay. That's an additional step in the project to throw the log out there and create a file for it. Otherwise, it stays within here, embedded within the program window. Just some quick navigation here. On the left-hand side is a process tree, and so you can navigate that way as well as clicking over here. You can create additional processes, so each page, you can create additional pages for additional processes. They would run in order that they're listed up here, so you can kind of organize. Once one gets too cluttered, you can move on and create a second one for like a second phase of your programs. And then down in the lower left is a utility window. No, thank you. Down in the lower left is a utility window. The first tab here in the utility window is where you have all your wizards. So these are they're called tasks, and these are, I think, what most people associate with Enterprise Guide. They're the wizard drop and drag ways of creating SAS code. I wasn't going to go into them because we can spend a lot of time looking at each one individually, but I'd really encourage people to try them out. The ones that do the data import from Excel especially is a useful one. It has some additional features that like proc import doesn't have. The query builder is a really great one. That's for building SQL code. And so even if you don't know SQL, you can use that to, it has a really nice interface and graphical interface for defining your joins, what kind of joins you have, and then what variables you want to bring in. It'll rename variables that have naming conflicts. So it does a lot of nice stuff. And then it creates the SQL code that you can then take a look at, and you can even edit it if you want. If you want to see just a quick example of one task for the import, just to show you how easy it is to kind of create these. For that insulin data, rather than doing my proc import, I could come here, find the input file, drop it in here. It will immediately create a shortcut for that file. This is the task icon. I can change the output data set here if I want to. Select the sheet that the data is stored in. There's a couple options up here for renaming columns to be compliant. It uses, it'll take in variable names with spaces with some of the new naming formats. And then this, so it does its best guess on what it thinks the column type should be. And if you've used proc import, and you might have run into this where it's hard to force the type a lot of times, and that can be very frustrating. Sometimes you have to resort to a bit and all. So this is one of the features I really like. You can go in here and you can force the data type. So you can set anything you want to be any data type you want. And when you reuse this, it will use that same definition again.
Even though it looks like a number, it's not a number.
Yeah.
I need those leading zeros.
Yeah.
Or the first one's a number, but there are characters, you know.
And then, so if I finish this removes special characters, which is sometimes a good idea. Then you get a icon for the actual task, the output, and if I think this one, if I double click on, it has its own container here where you have the code that it generated, the log that just ran, and then the output file.
Oh, that's cool. So it generates the code for your import.
It generates the code for you, yeah. And that's, so yeah, this is really nice, especially if you want to learn something maybe in graphing or something, then it's a nice way to learn. You can use the drag and drop, create code, and go in and edit it, copy and paste it into your own program, or do whatever you want with it. So it's really nice, and it's validated code. I mean, somebody's gone to a lot of effort to make sure that it's robust, and yeah, it's really nice.
So of the wizards that are there on the left, you mentioned that you find the SQL generator.
Yeah, the query builder is really good. The transpose is, a quick way to do a data transpose. The import one that I just showed you, those are the ones I've been using mostly. The query builder is very powerful. You can do, you can merge data sets with SQL. You can do filters, sorting, and do it all in one step. So it's pretty powerful. As long as you, it doesn't do everything. I still have to go back and do data merges sometimes because there's things that SQL just doesn't merge the same way. But if you can do it in SQL, it's a really nice way to. You can do a lot. You can define new variables in there. If you want, we can come back and take a look at it, and I can show you some examples with that.
I find that, it's a good place to start, but sometimes if you already know how to code something and then you try to use the task, you have to relearn, well, where do I go to add that option, or how do I, where you're used to knowing where you put your options in, where suddenly you're at this GUI interface and you have to figure out, how do I get the column percents instead of row percents, or, so for me, there was a little bit of a learning struggle where all of a sudden I felt like it wasn't easier. But for like the graphing, it's kind of a nice place to start, and then you can customize, with the actual code. So I think it depends on where you're starting from.
Yeah, true. The labeling is a little different. I mean, if you know the code, you can kind of, but it is different than what you see in the actual code. And then some of the defaults a little bit different. So then, like in a proc transpose, you get an underscore label and an underscore name variable for the previous names. And and when you do it through the wizard, or yeah, through the task, it's they use different. You can set the default setting is different, so some of those things will change. You have to kind of check out the default settings. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, like, if this source data changes. It took me a while to figure this out, that you don't have to recreate this with a new file. You can go into properties on the icon that has the link to the source, and then go to change. And so you can run this on a new file that presumably has the same structure. And if it doesn't have the same structure, you'll get an error in the code. But yeah, so and then the other thing I wanted to mention, this is it's a complicated file. The project file, the underlying structure is a zip file, and so they can become corrupted if your program hangs up halfway through. I've had it happen once, and it's frustrating. They do have one feature though that's really good to know about. In the options, the third feature down is the project recovery. So it does a recovery, or does a backup every 30 minutes, and it puts it in this directory here. And so
is that not on by is that the default?
That's the default,
okay.
yeah. So I think I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's just, it's good to keep archive backups of different versions. Yeah, that's just one thing to be aware of. I think those are the main things I wanted to kind of tell you about the basing. One other thing about viewing, you can set the panes side by side if you really want to get it all on the screen and look at your programs over here, and then the workspace over here. You kind of need a big screen for that. But okay, so if there's no other questions, then I'll go on to the second part.
How much do you use this, Mike? Are you pretty...
I'm using it for all our standard processing. So in the next example, you'll see, we have, it's kind of standard ongoing data processes that we run.
So if you've got something that you've already sort of built,
right?
Yeah.
It's great, and so we have, I think, 5 or 6 projects I'm using it on that way. I'm not quite there where I'm doing my exploratory SAS programming in it. I don't think there's any reason not to, other than just familiarity. I still return for the quick, trying to get stuff done really quick. I just know where everything's at in the base SAS. But I don't think there's any reason not to do it here. The differences are slight, and I think it's just familiarity, getting used to it.
And you were saying that you can set automatic programs, right? Schedule programs to run when you're not even there.
Yeah, that's a huge, great feature. And in the next example, let me show you that. That's what I do, which is a huge efficiency improvement.
So I could actually come to work in the morning, set a program running.
And you've already worked. Yeah. You've already got a lot of work done. Yeah.
You probably don't even have to come in.
Just remotely access my computer. Look at all this work I got done, Carl.
Okay. Yeah, so like I said, at the WHCRC, we do clinical trials, and as you can guess, probably in your projects as well, there's a lot of multiple steps. There's reading in the data, massaging the data, merging it with other data, doing data cleaning, and then doing data quality reports. So we have all those steps, and prior to using Enterprise Guide, I had 5 or 6 programs that I was having to run in order, and make sure, go through the log of each one individually and make sure that they ran, and so on and so forth. It's a very tedious process and time-consuming. So I started building a project in Enterprise Guide, and it got bigger and bigger, and as you go along, these can get quite large. So, but it's nice. There's a lot of great features to doing this. It is big, but the visual layout, I find, is just one of the key features that, as I started doing this, realizing how valuable that is. There's a huge amount of implicit documentation in doing this diagram. Yeah. A person can come in and say, okay, there's this cluster of things, these must be related. And then with Enterprise Guide, you can add these notes to do annotation. So here I've indicated this group here is some extra data, descriptive data for the input file. This is the input files from REDCap, so on and so forth. And then you have the links that have these implicit descriptions of what the assumed inputs are, what the outputs are, and what the order of things should be run. And so I took those 5 or 6 programs, and I did split them up. So in this one I have more programs. I've got about 10, I think. But that was, I think, another nice thing about Enterprise Guide is because you can do the structuring, this diagram kind of thing, it helps you think more modular about what you're doing. And so you're like, oh, okay, I should just isolate that into one program. And I draw an arrow into that, and that's a conceptual, it's a single concept that I want to kind of group together rather than trying to shoot for efficiency where, okay, I don't want to have to run 10 programs, I want to run 6. And you maybe are fitting too much into one program, and it gets harder to understand for somebody to come into it and understand what's going on. Here you have the visual, and it's really easy to group things, and it tells you the inputs and outs, and that's I think that's one of the primary just huge really benefits to using Enterprise Guide, especially in this case for these where you have multiple processes going on and it's hard to follow where all the players are and
were there any lessons learned in terms of how you how you set up your programs initially into your 5 programs, and then when you translated it to this, kind of realizing that there was either a certain order or this, I don't know, was there any caveats to like putting everything into a big project where maybe a piece of the puzzle didn't fit, or did it seem to
really.
work
It seemed
pleasantly well? Like
it worked pleasantly well. I was able to structure things the way I think they should be a little bit more. Where that just being able to be more modular about things and say, okay, this is just what I want this program to do. And even in sharing like macro names here, I only set that macro name once, maybe in a setup program or something like that, and then I get to use that same macro definition throughout the entire process. So I'm not redefining. I'm not sometimes using the same name for
all the time.
yeah. And you have this, one macro definition that you maybe defined in the beginning, and you can use it through the entire process.
So are there macros then that you're running? I mean, did you just bring in code?
Yeah, I just brought in code. So for this project, there's kind of two things. Most of it I brought in code, copy and paste. For the import of the raw data, I use the tasks a lot. Like I said, I think they're more powerful, and just visually, I think it's good to do it this way. You get somebody looks at this, realizes, oh, there's 4 tabs in that sheet. There's makes 4 tables, and then I'm merging that with this data down here and through this query builder. And then here, even for this, so down here is an attendance file, and it's just a regular table in Excel that has attendance with the visits across and the participants down. And so this is reading it in. This is the import task. I think I do a filter on it to get rid of blank records. I do a transpose, do some sorting, and add a analysis variable to it. And then I have my basic input data set here, which then I take over here, compared to the ID lists, which I pulled from over here, and validate the IDs and validate the acrostics, output some data checks. So these are bad IDs or bad acrostics or duplicate IDs. And then I have a good data set that I put over here with all my quote-unquote good data that I've pulled from REDCap. And so that's, it's been nice because I used to have like this. I think this was part of the large program up there. The visit status program was grouped with the missing forms report and part of the data query, and they were somewhat related and somewhat not, and now they're each separate in programs. And
so seeing this visualization helped you to.
It helps you think about it. It forces you to kind of think, think more structurally about what you're doing. And should that be in one program, or should I be splitting that up into different programs? And you don't have to think. I think we're really habituated to writing the most efficient code, and you have to let go of that a little bit here. Sometimes it means you have to duplicate things, or just write more verbosely, or maybe do 2 programs instead of 1. But as I did that, I found it actually, that is actually a better way to do it. Because when I'm cramming it all into one, I'm making some assumptions that I really shouldn't be making. And if I do it as 2 separate ones, I can write the code very much more clearly and specific to the task that it's doing.
That's a good point.
So a lot of this had to do with like data cleaning and making sure that you had valid matches and that there weren't any errors. So how are you outputting that so that then it can be reviewed by the clinical staff that would then go in and make the
So there's
updates
so there's a few different programs that have output. The visit status one has a list of expected visits, and so that's this icon here,
Okay, so
and it tells me the path.
So you're putting them into RTF files.
I'm putting them into RTF files and setting them out.
Yeah.
Then I'm also creating a query data set here, which so I have that one. Over here, I'm doing missing forms, creating a missing forms forms report, and then I also have a query table here, and I didn't draw these lines because there were too many lines, and it wasn't necessary to do it. But I could draw lines from here to this data query program. This program is the one that I take like a list of, say, 1,000 data checks that I want to validate and make sure that the data meet these criteria, and then any exceptions to those go out into an Excel file of a query report, and which allows the study coordinators to review those and make corrections or make comments as to why the exception occurred. And I merge those along with these other errors that come up with the visit report or the missing forms, and so it all comes out. So they end up with one table that has all their all the data errors in one place. In addition to that, these include alert values and everything. So there's one main report that they work with as far as data quality. I do put up these other reports because it's easier to read and get access to for us if we just want to look at visits or something like that, rather than going into that report.
So can you launch, I mean, if you click on, I see you have something that's creating an Excel spreadsheet over there on the right. So
yeah.
You can actually launch Excel from...
No, if I double click on this, so if I double click on the Excel icon, it assumes I want to import, and it's going to try creating an import task.
Okay, I see.
But this shows you that, oh, okay, this data, so this is cleaning adverse events descriptions, and so we use an Excel file to give standard descriptions to those and output a revised data set. And so this shows there's an input Excel file, there's an output Excel file, and even if that's all you know, that's something to get started. Oh, okay, so what's going on here? And then if I run this,
Here's the big test.
and it doesn't crash. It highlights in yellow all the things that it's created a to-do list down here in the bottom, and it's going through each of those. The green one is the one that's active. And it's going through each of those steps. So right now it's doing this program. And the other nice thing is, I forgot to mention this, it's a server model, and so it's sending all these requests to your local installation of SAS. It's not actually, it doesn't run SAS internally. And so while all this is running, I'm still free to use Enterprise Guide and go in and edit programs and even look at data. So it's really nice that you don't have to wait for the program to stop running before you go on and do something else, which is it's kind of nice.
So no more breaks.
No more force breaks. Yeah.
But is one limitation, I mean, can you open 2 instances of Enterprise Guide on your computer?
You can, yeah.
Oh, you can, okay.
Yeah.
So you could have 2 different projects.
Yeah. Copying, pasting from one project to another, you can do. Sometimes it's a little tricky, but I think I've been able to do that. You can, and then if you create different process pages, you can move stuff from one page to another. I'm calling it a page, but it's really a process entry. The scheduling is just right up here. You can schedule this particular process, or you can schedule the entire project. And it just puts a entry into your Windows scheduler, and these run in the middle of the night. So every morning I come in, I have refreshed data. The REDCap data is, I'm using an API to go and pull the data directly from REDCap. So it sends a request, downloads the CSV files, and then has those ready to go, for the next steps to import and create the data sets. You can, one of the neat, I think it's kind of a neat feature, you can do send reports through email. So you can send that report through email, or you can create another task in the project, a step in the project that will send that each time it runs.
And then, is there a procedure for that? Like, is it something that...
This is a task, so it's a window. You do have to, there are settings you have to get right, and then here at Mission Bay I had to get permission from IT. They had to set it up so my computer would allow that. But once you do that, it's really nice. So in one of the other projects, I did what we were talking about earlier, Mike, was I exported all the log code to a directory, scanned that, and then as a step, I read in all those logs, do a summary of the warnings and errors, and then email myself. So in the morning, I know whether there were errors or not in the program that ran overnight, which is a really nice. Because what I realized is I got so used to this running on its own, I didn't check it, and then until somebody told me that a report wasn't.
And then you're like, oh yeah, there is. It's right in their log.
Yeah. But they didn't. Yeah. So. What else? You can put prompts in the middle of here. I haven't thought of a kind of a situation where that would be useful, but you could have conditions on that.
So when you run the process, or when you run the project and you schedule it overnight, it goes through, does all this stuff. You can't have it output the task status window somehow?
This one here?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
You can create a project log. So you can, rather than having individual logs, there is a project log, and it's basically a appending of all the logs in one file. And then unfortunately I couldn't figure out any way you could export that. You could export that as a step. You can export the individual logs as a step, but the project log somehow, which is what I wanted to do. It wouldn't do it. And then the other thing I found with the project log is there's sort of a limit on how many lines, and if you run into that limit, then it gives you a message. And so it didn't seem, didn't seem worth.
So how did you actually scan the? I mean, did you use like a proc print? Like, can you put a proc print to at the beginning and or?
No. So I went here to each of the logs, and I set up another directory basically with all the logs, and as a step in the project, I export that log. I didn't do it in this example because it gets visually gets you have an extra step for each of those, and it gets cluttered. And that happens as your thing gets more complicated, and obviously it gets harder. You can spend a lot of time getting
reaches a point of diminishing returns. I'm sure.
Probably. But I think that's when you have to split things out in different processes and so on.
So that's what you would do. You would split them out as different processes of the same project, though.
Yeah. And then the processes run just in whichever order they're listed up here. So instead of having the links, you would just have a list of processes that will run in sequential order.
Yeah.
And I forgot to show you this. This is the down here in this utility window. There's a server tab, and that's where you have your, if we had SAS server, you'd have your servers listed. In this case, we just have the local installation, and then that's where you find your libraries. So these are libraries that I've set up in my AutoExec for that installation, and so they show up here, and then you can navigate to your data sets. And then the other thing I wanted to show you was, so that you saw how it creates icons for the errors, if there's an error in a program. The error handling is really great. I come in, you can identify really quickly which program it had an error and see in the pathway, what effects that would have. This one has a warning, that little yellow triangle. And so I found one thing you can do, if let's take a look at the warning. I'm going to turn the notes off. What I did here is actually forced a warning. So this isn't a SAS warning. This is one where I did a kind of data trap for missing visit IDs. And if you put warning : space in the first part of the put statement, then it will treat that as a SAS warning. It'll show up here in the log summary, and then it will be flagged in your process flows. So it's a nice way to use these features to your advantage.
How do you schedule?
There's a schedule menu right up here. Yeah.
And
So you click on the task and then you schedule it that way?
No, you can either schedule. You can only schedule the this particular process, which is this page, or you can schedule the entire project. So if I had multiple processes, it would run all of them.
I see. Okay.
And the only thing to be aware of that is that it will create a visual VBA file describing the schedule, and it'll put that in I think the directory of the program by default. But if you change the name of your project, And so if you go give it a different version number or something, it'll go to the old version. So you just have to make sure if you schedule something that you update the schedule, reschedule for a new version.
And yours is a daily thing. Like
Yeah, I
you
set
do
it up as a
weekly,
daily.
or-
Yeah, and it runs overnight. So I have I think 5 projects that run overnight.
I have a question. We have data that sits on a server. That would be nice to do overnight. I don't know, how's RedCap set up? And how would we go get it's an unsecured website because it's in Africa. So, but it has like a password and username. If we were to do something like this, how you grab your data from RedCap, how would we?
So the RedCap, this is code. If you go into RedCap, they have an API a feature that you can go into. You have to get a token, so you have to get like this long string that's basically a password, your individual password to it. And with that token, you use this proc HTTP to send the request up to RedCap, and then it returns the files. I think it would depend on the installation of that version of that RedCap, whether they have that activated and how it works.
RedCap.
Oh.
No, it's just it's a secure website.
That you have. Oh, it's a website.
Yeah, Africa puts the data on there, and then we go in with our password and get it.
They would need an API feature for you to do
Okay.
that. Yeah. So it would be on their end whether they have that or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can set it up.
I do have to leave my machine on, for this to happen. I have to lock it, not log out.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit unfortunate. Yeah, and so it'd be nice to have SAS server to do this so that these things would run, whether or not I was logged in. I think it's.
And then, how does it know to pick the tables? You just, whatever the table name
It's
is.
part of your definition. This hideous string here is, there's information that there's a set of parameters in it.
Okay.
Each API kind of has its own syntax,
Okay.
but there's a set of parameters, and you tell it which table. So
Oh.
in this RedCap example, I don't have to do. I download the 4 tables, but I don't actually have to download all 4.
You just take all
Yeah,
Okay.
I ended up using them, and I did find this was really nice. The RedCap API gives you a single table, and you can use the data dictionary and merge that together and to create your individual tables. But what else? Yeah, how do you use it? Do you run?
Oh, basically I just run for the analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, just do analysis because I still use the SAS to do.
You use regular
Yeah,
SAS.
regular
Okay.
SAS to do the data management part.
Yeah.
Because we don't have step package so far, because this probably is good for future. I will do.
Yeah, I'm getting used to
So it's like the graphs. This is pretty good future. Should do that. Just that you talk about previously.
Yeah,
all the sets,
I haven't
yeah.
tried a lot of the tasks,
That's it.
but I think there'd be one way to learn, especially some of the more complicated procedures like SAS graph.
Yeah.
So
Does UCSF have the SAS business intelligence?
that's a separate.
Is it totally separate?
I think that's totally separate.
the reason
They're
I-
similar. I think this is the kind of the format that a lot of those things are going.
Yeah.
So the what's the other one? The data miner and those other business programs I think are going with this kind of interface. So I think it's a good
What I was
good thing to learn.
told is that if you could actually, let's say for some of these reports, you can open up a Word document and have a SAS file be kind of connected to that Word document, and you can run it from Word. Have you ever done that?
No, well, there's the Office. What is it? The add-in where you can pull data into Excel. You can pull data sets into Excel. I haven't used it that much, but it's basically linked into SAS, and then you get an extra ribbon that's specific to SAS, and I think with that you have access to like SAS data and then predefined procedures.
Because how this was described to me is somebody who's not a SAS programmer, but they want to look at generate reports, so that they could run the report by opening up the Word document and then running the SAS program that generates that report.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
nice. So if we had SAS server, and I think if you have that set up that way with the
Okay.
web, is it web analytics? I don't know. There's a few things, but yeah, that would be nice. I don't think this alone allows you to do that, but yeah.
I think that's in other software, not it's enterprise.
I think
can't
that's
remember.
enterprise.
It's other one. It's not in the enterprise. It's other one separate. When you open the SAS package, I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
They use it for usually that one for the
See, I
people.
thought it was like BI, like business intelligence
Yeah,
or something.
that's for
That-
the
that has the-
not
Yeah,
the
that rings a
program.
bell.
Yeah,
I
there's
think you might be
enterprise
right
guide,
about that.
enterprise minor, but yeah, I don't. That's not.
Yeah.
Sorry, enterprise guide. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to show you. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to look at? These query. Oops. So double clicking opens up the actual code, but if I modify, right click and modify, then this is the wizard. So you have your input data sets on the left hand side, and then you have your output table, the variables. You drag and drop the variables over. It automatically gives the table temporary names. So it gives them T1, T2, T3, T4. So it automatically does that for the SQL, which you usually have to do in SQL. These are calculated variables. So it has a little wizard for that. And then the join types are defined in this join window. So and I think this is, if you're new to SQL, this is probably a big help for figuring out how you do joins between different tables. And you get a big selection of, I think, 7 or 8 types of joins. And they change the little icon tells you this is a left join. So it's pretty slick. And then, if, like I said, if any of the names are competing, then it'll add a 1 or a 2 to the name so that you get both variables in there. And then you have a tab for setting filters. And in the filters, so with all the tasks here, you get these sort of drop-down things. So if you're going to do a filter on a particular value, you can go and you can load those values, so you don't have to. So it makes things like that a lot quicker.
Nice.
Since you don't have to manually do that. And then you get the output sort. Yeah, those are the main things.
Did you say you've had some crashing issues with it? Or
No.
does it,
I mean, I had a program, hang up, and then that I had a corrupted file, but no, I mean, no different than regular SAS. I mean, I was doing something wrong. Pushing the limits, yeah. Pushing the limits, I think. So, yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so I
it's
hope that's
really-
helpful. I really
yeah,
encourage
it's a
you to
nice
jump
primer.
in and
It's
try
fantastic.
it.
I can already
Yeah.
think of a few things we could do in our
The
project.
linkage there.
The facility reports could be put into this. Don't you have to run a whole series of programs for that? We can look into that.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Is anyone else here, just on a somewhat different topic, is anyone else here using SAS server? Okay.
It's
Mike
not
and I
that
were talking about it a little
yeah,
bit
it's not
today.
that expensive. So I think it would be a matter of setting up the server or getting server space and time. But it seems like it'd really be worth doing. Yeah, I think if I read it right, it was only $1,000. And I'm not sure if that's for multiple users. It seemed like it was, but I have to look into it a little bit more. But especially with this enterprise guide, I think it'd be really nice to have. It would free you up and allow you. I think that's when you can start using like the software you were talking about, and where the code sits there and waits for requests. And then, but that's the different package.
Do other groups have an interest in exploring SAS server?
Interested in learning benefits of it, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that's kind of the way I feel about it too.
So a SAS server, when I used to, you work on a SAS server, you kind of did the login and you would write your programs using a specific editor. Does it still have the Windows interface where each user kind of logs into the server and is able to use that server as...
I don't know. If you're using traditional SAS, I'm not sure what the interface is. I think you still, I'm not sure how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Here with Enterprise Guide, this is, it would just sit there. It wouldn't really be that different here. You just would have a different server, on the server list on the left-hand side. But the interaction would be, the interface wouldn't change at all. With traditional SAS, I'm not sure how it works with SAS server. Yeah, I think it looks the same. But I think you have access to more features where you can identify a server or log into a server to have access to the metadata on it. I don't really know.
But wouldn't the difference be that instead of installing SAS on your local machine, that you're using SAS on a server, so you're actually
Right.
logging into that server and then running SAS from
I
there?
think so, yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and also you'd have the resources of the server, the memory and the disk speed,
Right.
Resources of the server as opposed to using
Resources of your
what our
computer.
local desktops have.
Right.
To me, that would be the big benefit. And plus also, maybe the network connection would be faster, so we've got masses of data stored on the network. But to access it, we have to go through the little
Yeah.
pipe that our computers connected on
Mhm.
to. But if